Hello and welcome to Sitting With It with me, Jock Spivvy. As you will know from my last two episodes, I have gone from having AI record these little podcast episodes to actually speaking them myself. That was a big step for me, and in my journey of podcasting, I am an author, a podcaster more recently, and I like to think of my lived experiences as being able to help other people. The podcast Sitting With It is a space for reflection, emotional honesty, and the thoughts we often carry quietly within ourselves. Here we take the time to explore the complexities of being human, identity, relationships, mental health, and the experiences that shape how we see ourselves and others. These reflections are not quick answers or simple solutions. They're about learning to sit with the questions, the emotions, and the moments of understanding that come when we slow down and really look inward. Today's episode is about something that quietly shapes all of us, whether we realise it or not. It's how the world labels us and what happens when we start to believe it. At some point, things shift. You move out of your family environment and the world starts to see you. Not properly, not deeply, just quickly. And that's the thing. The world doesn't really take its time with you. It doesn't sit down. It doesn't ask, who are you really? It looks, it decides, it labels, and most of the time, it moves on. I always knew that I wasn't incapable. That was never the issue. But I didn't show up in the way people expected me to. And for a long time, I couldn't explain why. Looking back now, it's obvious I didn't want to be seen. I skipped school a lot, not for attention, not to rebel, not because I couldn't do the work. It wasn't about intelligence. It was about visibility. Being in a classroom meant being watched, being measured, being compared. And even if no one was actively doing that, it felt like they were. So I avoided it. And here's the part that's easy to miss from the outside. Avoidance isn't always laziness. Sometimes it's a protection. Sometimes it's the brain trying to keep you safe from something you don't fully understand. Psychology that makes sense. Or psychologically that makes sense. If being seen has ever felt unsafe, whether emotionally, socially, or internally, your brain will start to associate visibility with risk. So it reduces exposure. It pulls you back. It finds the way out, finds the exit, even if logically you know you're capable. From the outside, none of that is visible. What people see is lazy, unfocused, wasting their potential. And the labels are powerful because they simplify you as a person. They take something complex and reduce it to something easy to understand for them. But in doing that, they miss you completely. And the more you hear those labels, the more they start to stick. Throw enough labels, you'll become them. Not because they're true, but because they're repeated. And repetition has a way of becoming belief. So now you're not just avoiding being seen. You're also starting to question yourself. Maybe I am lazy. Maybe I don't try hard enough. Maybe something is wrong with me. But let me ask you something. Have you ever been called something often enough that you started to act in line with it, even if it didn't feel right? For me, it created this strange gap between what people thought I was and what I felt. Because internally, it didn't feel like I was incapable. It felt like I was holding myself back on purpose. Like I knew I could step forward, but something stopped me. Something in me. That's where it gets interesting, because that something isn't random. There's usually a reason for it. Sometimes it's a fear of failure. Sometimes it's a fear of judgment. Sometimes it's a fear of being exposed. And sometimes it's all of that at once. Looking back now, from September 2025, ADHD played a role in this too. Undiagnosed at the time, but very present. Not just in attention or focus, but in how I experience the world. ADHD isn't just about distraction. It's also about emotional sensitivity, rejection sensitivity, overstimulation, and a constant scanning of your environments. It's also executive dysfunction, and it's procrastination on a cognitive level. It's a paralysis. So when you combine that with not wanting to be seen, you don't just avoid situations, you start to manage them. I got very good at reading people quickly. What they expected, what they needed, what version of me would fit. And I could become that. Different rooms, different people, different versions of me. Work environments, handled. Social settings, easy. New people, no problem. On the surface, that looks like confidence. It looks like someone who is adaptable, socially capable, even impressive. But underneath it, there's something else going on. Because if you can be what everybody needs you to be, where are you in that? That's not something you think about at 16 or 18 or even 25. At the time, it just feels like this is how I move through the world. You adjust, you read the room, you become what works. And the world rewards that because it doesn't always reward authenticity. It rewards function, it rewards outcomes, it rewards what it can see and measure. But here is the problem. When you live like that long enough, you start to lose track of what's actually you. Let me ask you this. Do you behave the same way in every environment, or do you shift slightly, or do you shift a lot, depending on who's there? And if you shift, which one is you? For me, there wasn't one clear answer. There were versions and all of them worked, but none of them felt complete. I stayed in that space for a long time. Not failing, not fully stepping forward either. Just in between. And that in between place is interesting because it's comfortable, it's safe, you're not exposed, but you're also not fully living. There's a concept in psychology around this, and I am not a psychologist and this is just my opinion. It's often referred to as masking. You'll have heard it with ADHD, you might have heard it with autism, where you adapt your behaviour to fit your environment, to reduce the risk, to increase acceptance and to stay safe. And masking isn't always a bad thing. We all do it to some degree. It's part of being human. But when masking becomes your default setting, you lose connection to your baseline. You stop asking, what do I want? What do I think? Who am I when I'm not adapting? Because adapting becomes easier than answering those questions. And then something else happens. You become very aware of how you're being seen constantly. You walk into a room and you scan. How am I coming across? Am I saying the right thing? Am I too much? Not enough? That level of awareness can look like confidence, but it's often anxiety in disguise. And it's exhausting because you're not just existing, you're managing all the time. Let me ask you this. Do you feel like you're being yourself in most situations, or are you managing how you come across? For me, managing became normal. So normal that I didn't even question it until later. When things started to slow down, when I had to sit with myself more, when there were fewer distractions, that's when the questions started to show up. Who am I? When am I not adapting? What do I actually want? What do I believe without anybody else in the room? And those questions aren't easy to answer because they require honesty about yourself. And honesty, when you've spent years adapting, can feel uncomfortable because you realise something. You weren't just navigating the world. You weren't protecting yourself from it. And the protection served a purpose. It got you through. It helped you function. It kept you safe in environments where being fully seen didn't feel possible. But at some point, you're going to have to ask yourself, is it still serving me? Because what kept you safe before might be the very thing that's holding you back now. The world will always label you. That doesn't change. People will always form an opinion based on what they see. But you get to decide. Do I accept those labels? Do I challenge them? Do I change them? Or do I start defining myself? That's the shift. Not from being seen, but from understanding what you're being seen as and whether it's actually you. It was a powerful reflection for me. And on reflection, the world doesn't always see you. It sees what it expects to see. You can fit into that as yourself, defined by you, authentically. Here's a few questions just to sit with. What labels have you carried from the outside world? Which ones felt true? And which ones never quite fit? Where in your life are you performing instead of being? And if you stop performing, what might change? Thank you for listening or reading and sitting with the reflections. If this resonated with you, you can explore more thoughts like this through the Sitting With It podcast, a space for honest conversations about identity, emotional well-being and relationships, LGBTQ plus life, and the many ways we experience being human. I am on social media, search Sitting With It Pod on Instagram and Facebook, or visit www.sittingwithitpod.com. Feel free to email me at any point at sittingwithitpod@gmail.com. And if this reflection made you pause, think, or see something a little differently, consider sharing it with someone who might need that moment too. Until next time, I have been Jock Spivvy, that's spelled J-O-K. Take a moment, breathe, and sit with it.